Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Virtual Digital Claims for the afternoon session. This session, we're going to be looking at leveraging digital to transform the customer journey. And just before I introduce the panel, I just thought I'd recap, I suppose, on a little bit of this morning and kind of build up into this afternoon's sessions. So this morning we kicked off and I showed a slide from the pre-event survey, which was very encouraging because it showed that 57% of people were rethinking claims customer journeys as part of their transformation strategy within claims. And then our subsequent poll within that asked, you know, how far you are along the journey, with the majority either having a plan and a strategy in place or at the early stages of talking about that and putting that plan together. So that's very encouraging. I think the other thing that came out this morning's session and the pre-event survey is that it's not all about technology. It's about budget, it's about mindsets, culture, change, skills, capabilities. And the subsequent poll that we had around that, what is a key driver for claims transformation in the organization? Certainly out on top, they're improving customer service, which is the focus of our discussion today. So do get involved, as always, with the questions in the chat, and we'll work as many of those into our discussion as possible. The way that we've structured this session is that we've taken the questions from the pre-event survey and the ones that have been submitted by you, and we've put together a panel based around those. And we're going to talk through those questions, but if you've got specific questions you would like to ask the panel, now's your chance to put them into the chat, and we'll work them in. So the panel for this afternoon, they are Christine Matthews, who is Head of Claims at Brought by Many, Amy Brettel, who is Head of Customer UK Claims at Zurich Insurance, and Rohan Regis, who's Vice President of Insurance UK and Europe at EXL Group. And just while we get their cameras and mics switched on, I'm going to introduce the first poll. Throughout the session, we're going to have a number of polls. Take part in the polls and you get to see the results. So Ellie, could you put the first poll up, please, in the chat? So the first poll there, what's been the biggest change in customer claims expectations that you've seen over the last year? So there's, I'm sure there's more, put them in the chat if none of those resonate, but here's 10 seconds on the clock. So firstly, welcome everybody to the panel. Hello, hello. So just before we get into the first question, I think it'd be good to just reflect on that poll. Certainly 54% seeing multi-channel as a big change in terms of customer expectations, and I think we'll probably touch on this as we go through our discussion. But perhaps Rohan, any initial thoughts on those poll results? Any surprises, or what you expect really?
Not really, Jeremy. I think it's in line with what we are seeing. The proportion of digital natives increase. I think it is only natural that we will see that they are expecting all channels and all options that do exist. And I think the other big element that we are seeing is that they want to be in control of the process, as well as in control of at what pace do they want the claim to progress as well. So absolutely in line with what we're seeing.
Okay, cool. Right, so let's get into some of the questions that have been submitted, and I just want to get into this in a bit more detail around this poll question, and perhaps I can come to you, Amy, first, and just to kind of, if we can conceptualize how these customer expectations have changed, and then we can discuss how we're going to meet them. So perhaps I could ask you just to kick off this part of the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, and afternoon, everybody. I guess I'm going to sort of just take a step back and say, I think in one sense, customer expectations have changed hugely, and in another, I don't think they've changed at all. And let me perhaps just explain what I mean by that. So, there's a lot of talk about kind of this new normal and what are things going to look like. But I fundamentally believe that some core things remain the same. In order for us to survive, we've got to continue to solve customer problems. And actually, our job as claims professionals, as insurance, is to help people when they have a problem. And I don't think that has changed. And I think people still expect us to be able to do that in a human and empathetic manner. I guess perhaps what has changed, I think I'd probably call out three things. I think pace, and perhaps some of the answers in the poll question alluded to that. And I don't just mean pace of sort of expectation about how quickly people want a response or a decision, but actually just the pace of change. And actually, I think as we design our kind of future models, and I was really pleased to see, in the poll that you showed earlier, that 32% of respondents have got a plan and strategy to respond to customer needs. But I think that plan and that strategy needs to be agile, because needs are changing and evolving at a more rapid pace. So not just sort of evolving current needs, but making sure that we set ourselves up to be agile for needs in the future. I think the what is changing. So there's a lot of talk now about demand-based on-off insurance models. That will have quite significant ramifications for us as claims professionals. And also, I do wonder if the events of the last year or so perhaps made people value different things. So perhaps are people more interested in ensuring their health than perhaps their possessions? What do people kind of value today that perhaps they didn't value, some 12 months or so ago? And I can potentially see a rise in purpose-driven products. And then what else I think will change is the how, and I'm sure that'll be a lot of what we talk about today, that it's clear that digital is going to play a bigger role. It already is. Customer demand patterns are changing. The 9 to 5 is dead. The kind of polls just show that people expect multi-channel, omni-channel kind of responses, agile response teams. So I think those are some of the things that I would call out have and are changed. But I don't know what my fellow panelists think.
Oh, Christina, let me just switch your mic on. Apologies.
Lip reading is not a skill I've learned yet, Christine.
I'll do that again. I think actually customers, they have changed some of their views, but like you say, the fundamental thing is exactly the same. They're actually looking for us as insurers to deliver on a policy promise, something they actually bought. When they incepted their policy, they looked at that product and they want that to be delivered on. And I think that is exactly the same as it was prior to everybody being locked down. But I think there is a change in tolerance of waiting periods. So I think because people are sat at home, they are not traveling to work, etc., they're more likely to contact you or look for an update. And some of those updates do need to be multi-channeled. And I think that's where customer choice comes in. I don't think we can force a certain type of an update on a customer, but so long as it's flexible and customers can choose that, I think they can drive their own communications as much as anything.
Yeah, go on, Rowan. Sorry.
Wants the Amazon experience when it comes to claims, but I agree with Amy as well as Christine. I think that change is happening, but one thing that I do see and I see happening at a much faster pace is while expectations have changed, I think the rate at which their expectations will change, I believe, is going to be much faster in the future. I mean, as products like connected car, connected home, connected me all pick up, the expectation is that all that data is going to be used in real-time basis to go ahead and reduce verification costs, reduce response times, and ultimately also how does that play into claim prevention? Because I think that is really going to be the future as you think about customer journeys and where this industry is headed in the next few years. And Amy and Christine, I don't know if you're seeing that at the places you work right now, but I think that's going to be a big shift over the course of the next few years.
Yeah, I think you're right about data. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think from a product point of view, customers actually do want individual tailored product for themselves. And I think in the past, we've had a very singular sort of attitude to it. And if the product doesn't fit the customer and their individual needs, that's when we fall down in claims, because we're already started on the back foot because the product just didn't suit that customer. It's so important to gather that feedback from customers to build products around them and make sure customers actually understand what they're buying. Because if we get that wrong, we're just trying to fix it all the way through from a claims point of view, and I think that's really difficult. Yeah, I think product is really quite key to us, really.
I think one of the things that came out this morning as well was kind of that claims is claims are often seen as this function that sits alone, but now I think there's a much more integrated approach to transformation. People are thinking, when I put that slide up about transforming, really rethinking claims, I think they're rethinking it in the design of their whole organization rather than the function. And that again is a big shift that's happened over the last couple of years. And just one other point, I think, before we move on to some of the practicalities of this, I think your point around tolerance is right, Christine. I think we've had other sessions where we've talked about tolerance, and I think in the first lockdown there was tolerance from people that you had to work. You were trying to get your organization to work from home. That tolerance has evaporated as people just expect you to have dealt with it and got on with it. And And I think the poll results also reflect that in the multi-channel. You know, they just expect you to be on live chat. You know, why wouldn't you be? Is kind of the question. So yeah, really interesting. I wanted to kind of get into the topics around the challenges. And Christine, if I could fire this one at you to start this conversation off, that'd be great. What are the practical challenges in delivering delivering digital claims customer experiences, and I guess the consistency of those experiences as well, and then how do you overcome the challenges?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is something that we've looked at forever, and this is about individuals and individual customers, because individual claims and customers need individual solutions, and customers need to be able to choose those solutions, the ones that they need. A lot of people look at how we can update customers. So yeah, lots of different omni-channels, lots of different ways of customers talking to us about what's happening with their claim, present positions and things. But to be honest, if actually a customer needs to contact us and ask all that information, it sort of means we're a little bit failing already, because we should really be be trying to handle that claim, validate it and settle it within all of that product policy. Promise. And from a customer point of view, if that's all happening and being delivered, they don't need the updates quite as much. And I think that's probably one thing that we have to sort of step back and look at and say, actually, as a claims person, we need to validate it and pay it as quickly as possible. And some of that, for me, some of the sort of KPIs and traditional things that people look at, so we look at leakage, we look at OPEX, and those sometimes drive the wrong behaviors. You know, you can you start looking at leakage, and everybody's got a leakage target, I'm sure, and for a claims handler, I think it's drummed into them constantly, make sure you get the leakage right. And sometimes you could spend hundreds of hours just trying to save £50 on a claim, but actually in an OPEX point of view, you've just probably spent 3 times as much as that. And the balance between the two, I think, is really important. And so we have to work out a different way of looking at KPIs and the measures between those, so that it does sort of help the overall claims journey and the customer delivery. And I think the whole KPI measurement of claims needs to be reviewed, as well as the way we communicate.
And I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And actually, I think more focus on customer outcome and driving a culture where handlers feel empowered to make customer-centric commercial decisions is really, really important. And I think reimagining that sort of cultural aspect, I suppose, is what you're talking about, Christine, and actually creating, you know, we talk about having a customer obsessed culture where you can just stop for a minute, pause and think about what it is that a customer needs from that particular interaction. And I think where I'd link that into the sort of digital agenda is you can have the very best technology at your kind of handlers' fingertips, but if they've still got a legacy mindset, or they're still focused in on some of the metrics you talked about, Christine, it won't transform that customer's experience. You know, vice versa, you could have the worst kind of creaking technology that's green screen and older than I am, but if you've got the right people with the right mindset, that's not a barrier. So for me, one of the biggest challenges, or perhaps one of the most important fundamentals to get right, is the culture that you have, and then you build from that in terms of delivering a digital experience.
I think the one other point that we notice when we go ahead and work with clients, particularly in the area of claims, is the start point is many times starts with trying to convince the client that one size fits all approach will perhaps not work. And very often the start point really needs to go back and look at the customer base, look at the personas, try and then map out the customer journey for very, very specific personas. And like Amy just said, I mean, it's really not always that you need the shiniest piece of technology that will actually get you there. But as long as you have the intent, and as long as you have the mindset to change, and you understand who you're changing the experience for, I think it's easier to be on that journey. And I think the other element is probably being as agile as possible. I think at least when it comes to a lot of digital initiatives, I think there's far too much time spent in trying to, put together the most perfect operating model with the most perfect journeys. But, often you realize that you might start that initiative, but the return on it is perhaps not as good as you would have expected. So I think, ensuring the organization has an agile mindset, with a fast approach, I think will perhaps have the best, opportunity to drive the best outcomes for the company.
And just thinking about that quite practically, Rohan, one of the things that we found when we've been doing lots of innovative, kind of the shiny new things, actually we've had a lot of our teams say to us, that's great, but I need you to fix that blue circle on my screen that lags for 10 seconds every time I switch screens. And I think we've found that in order to get cultural buy-in and organizational buy-in to deliver that, fantastic customer experience that we strive for, we've got to have a balance of the kind of shiny, new, exciting stuff, but also fixing the pain points that people feel today. And I think getting the balance of that investment profile right is a challenge, because a lot of us don't want to be investing huge amounts of money into legacy systems, but actually I think you do need to balance those small pain points, and those little 10 seconds of a screen hanging every time actually adds up to some quite big numbers in terms of efficiency savings. So that kind of careful balance of fixing some of the legacy but also driving towards the future, I think is a challenge, and there's no kind of perfect pivot point on that scale, but it's an important consideration, I think. And
it comes to Christopher's point in the chat around mindset and culture, reflections on purpose, having it, and it comes from the top, doesn't it? It's about leadership and them defining what the purpose is of the organization and claims within that, and then things start to flow. And you're right, Amy, those incremental changes and understanding what happens on the front line, for leaders to know that, I think that's quite often lost, between the front line and the managers making the decisions, or wherever the decisions are made. Sometimes that line is too stretched. So that'd be. I want to bring in the second poll, if I can, Ellie, which I'd like to know. What do you feel your biggest challenges are regards to delivering consistent customer digital journeys, rather? So you've got a few options there, 4 options there, or if there's something other, write it in the chat. Complete those and you get to see the results. Here's 10 seconds on the clock. So yeah, pretty close there between legacy technology and culture and mindset and thinking, I suppose. Angie, data's up there as well. Christine, you said you were going to talk about data, so perhaps now's a good time for you
to mention it. Yeah, it's quite interesting there that you've got in the question data quality and governance. So it's quite interesting to put them both together. I know you have to have data quality and you have to have a governance about it, but I'm seeing governance a little bit different. But from a data point of view, I sort of think that I know legacy systems is a big issue for this. The more data that you actually get, the more it will help us to change. So, I was talking before about number of claims handler touches. Some claims can outweigh the amount that you just saved in leakage, and data can really help you with that, so much so. And you can look at individual claims processes. So you've got individual journeys, individual touch points, and all of that cost will help you drive the changes in KPIs that actually will help you drive some of that cultural change. And that has to come from senior leaders as well as claims handlers. So you mentioned senior leader mindset, and some of those KPIs you can show through the data that, by pushing some and making it your priority, it means that the overall picture is actually worse than it was before you started pushing that particular KPI, especially leakage. I think leakage makes a big difference sometimes. So, yeah. So that's where data for me is very important.
Yeah, Rowan, I'm going to come to you because obviously data is the lifeblood that flows along these digital systems, and quite often I guess in my experience talking to people, they're siloed. The data quality is poor often, and there's a lack of, in the last session we talked about data literacy, you know, within an organization. Do people understand that, you know, putting the information in that system means that it impacts another person? And how does that job role work? You know, understand that. So just some thoughts from your perspective, from a technology point of view.
Rohan, you're testing my lip reading skills again.
Yeah, I think it just dropped out. Try again, Rowan.
I was just saying that I think there is great opportunity in the claims journey to go both, you know, modernize as well as digitize. If you look at the claims journey, it is probably the most personal, you know, in the entire, you know, insurance life cycle, and particularly where the opportunity is to build a loyal customer base. And I think data is really key and central to this. I think, you know, where organizations are, whether it is, you know, trying to consume new data sources, whether it is to go ahead and you know, integrate with the insurtechs and the solutions which the insurtechs have, and also, you know, to pick up all the shiny new, you know, solutions such as conversational AI, you know, AI ML based algorithms and solutions. I think data really is the key, and I think, you know, having that, you know, structured data asset is probably going to be the differentiator between, you know, organizations who are able to pivot and pivot fast enough versus, you know, the ones who are going to be spending a lot of time just trying to organize and put, you know, proper data into their systems and processes, because you know, the future is going to revolve, you know, very, very quickly around a lot of these solutions. And you know, without the data in place, I think most organizations are going to struggle to be able to keep up with the pace, you know, particularly in terms of, you know, integrating with, I mean, having information which is available real time, you know, integrating with insurtechs and other organizations that bring these solutions, you know, that can be, you know, feeding back to customers on an almost immediate basis. I don't know, is that something which you're seeing, Jeremy and Christine?
Yes, I think there's a lot of talk about data being the new oil, isn't there? And I think I'd have a slightly different take on it, which is I think a USP and advantage, both in terms of delivering for customers and competitive advantage, will come from an organisation's ability to use and interpret data. And actually, I think, Jeremy, you made the point about, you know, the role of the future handler interpreting that data. And I think actually investment in skills then and supporting our people to develop, to use this rich, really, I totally agree with the comments that Christian and Mara have made about the importance of data. But I mean, one of the things that we're doing just at a very practical level is we've launched both a data and an automation academy. And I think where this is working really well is because it's part of our commitment to sort of long-term job security and being able to give people new skills. But also, if you have got frontline staff developing RPA processes or automation processes and actually learning how to interpret data, they bring their own knowledge and their own experience to that process, and you get far greater outcomes than if it's done by sort of a data team perhaps that sits slightly to the side of the function as well. So I think it's both the use of data and the skills that are needed to interpret data that where the real sweet spot comes.
Yeah, and I think that's where the overall cultural change comes, because it's not just with a team of data people, it is throughout the whole of claims, so that you can really understand it. And a whole of claims needs to be asking those questions. I wonder how much it's costing us to do this touch on every claim. I wonder how this is happening. And those sort of questions, to be able to find that data and get the answers to, because they're the people who are really living it every day, they can really help build new processes that fit customers, claims handlers, which then actually reduces all your OPEX. There's a big knock-on effect on financials on it, but from a customer journey point of view, it can be amazing.
Can I just develop the area of automation and RPA, which seems to be a very hot topic in certain circles, and I wondered, it's and at the moment it seems to be playing out in underwriting. You know, in my experience, that's where the investment seems to be going. So I just wondered whether I could get your thoughts on how you see automation and eventually intelligent automation playing out in the claims space, and do you think kind of a straight through process for for claims is a holy grail, or is that, you know, are we missing something there? It's interesting just to develop that a bit further. That's Christine. I could start with you, perhaps.
I think it plays exactly, we talked about the fundamental thing about handling claims is that we are validating claims and paying them really quickly. That's what customers expect. And to help that, actually, I'll go back to data. If you use data, you can identify claims that you can actually do straight through touch from, because the fact that you have just spent, you know, 3 days investigating this bit and this bit, but you can show that by doing that, you haven't saved anything. It was a complete and utter waste of energy to actually do it. It didn't save you anything from indemnity. It didn't help the customer. And actually, it's much better for you if you'd just done a straight through process piece. It comes in, it's validated through the system, all policy and stuff gets validated on it, and it can go straight through to payment, because you wouldn't save anything by sending it to a claim. So you can see in the data that actually it is a better option for a lot of areas just to go straight through and automate. And one of the beauties about it is that you do get absolute consistency. As much as we you know, sort of develop and help our teams, it's still going to be a manual thing, but that consistency that comes from systems and automation actually makes a big difference for even estimating.
And I agree. I think it is a huge opportunity, and I think, you know, often I hear people talking about it in terms of the sort of small value claims, and I actually don't think that the opportunities around straight through is limited to small value claims. I mean, look at the kind of concept of parametric insurance. I mean, we're talking, you know, multi-million-pound claims there, but can be settled based on, you know, independently verifiable data. So I think there is a real opportunity. I think it's something as an industry we rapidly need to get our head around. And I think part of that opportunity comes from also policy interpretation, the role that, you know, smart sort of tech can play there, because our handlers, I mean, they're interpreting multiple policies, you know, sometimes in the hundreds of policy wordings, you know, average personal lines policy, 30 pages, commercial probably up to 60 or beyond. And actually, I think freeing handlers up from having to go through that documentation by surfacing the key facts that they need to know from particular policy wording to then evaluate against the claim represents a brilliant opportunity. And I think for me, all of this sort of RPA intelligent automation actually frees handlers up to do what I said I think is fundamentally important right at the start of the conversation. Invest that time in the empathetic human touch and the proactive communication rather than us having to kind of respond to queries that you called out, Christine. So for me, it's a real benefit. And actually, Jeremy, just on your point, I sort of raised an eyebrow, I think, because you said you're seeing a lot of investment in underwriting.
I know, I saw that.
Yeah, so my eyebrows. And the reason for that was because we've actually just had a look at sort of all of the RPA processes that we've got live in Zurich in the UK at the moment, and sort of across claims and with our kind of one of our key partners, WNS, we've got 50% of the total processes live within the UK. So actually, my response was, I'm seeing an awful lot of investment and opportunity in claims rather than, you know, clearly it's coming in other areas, but actually claims is the dominant investment space in Zurich.
Great.
You say a really good point about product, because product actually plays a massive part in automation. Because if you make that product far too complicated, you'll never be able to automate anything to validate, because it is so complicated and there's too many little bits of exclusions, or this might happen and this might happen. And if your product actually is easier for customers to understand and for claims handlers to understand, the system will be able to automate it better as well. So it does go back into underwriting just as much as it does in claims to understand the product.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
And just to add, I think, you know, all of, you know, our investments in some of the solutions that we are developing, you know, all tie in with, you know, some of the examples that, you know, Amy and Chris gave, you know. So if you look at, you know, can you go ahead and develop an AI ML based solution to do coverage verification? You know, absolutely yes. I mean, do we need, you know, somebody to go through 60 pages of policy documentation to check whether a particular coverage exists? So, you know, there are examples across the claims value chain which lend itself, you know, very, very well to both simple robotic based automation, or, you know, the more complex, you know, AI ML and, you know, advanced solutions that, you know, can help make the claims adjusters and the claims functions lives both simpler and, with the end objective of, going ahead and creating capacity, as well as ensuring that, they are then able to focus on the most complex cases rather than, focusing on a 50-pound claim that, could have been auto adjudicated anyway.
I think one of the things that does help, though, I know, I believe you can automate any level of claim. It doesn't matter about the size of it. I think the thing that sort of slows us down a little bit sometimes is people's risk appetite, and that's what slows you down with the high value claims, because they see those as such a big risk. Oh, and we're not automating that could cost us anything. And the lower value ones, you'll sort of get that sign off and that agreement to a little bit faster, I think. And just by proving the case, by doing it on lower level claims, you can then start working on some of the higher level ones, I think, because I think you're absolutely right, Amy. It doesn't matter if the principles are the same and they're very, sort of logical steps, you can put automation rules in. But I think people's risk appetite is just not there yet for those larger values. I think that's where you get knocked back.
So, Amy, I'm just going to ask you, just before we move on, just talk about some of the other things in the poll around legacy. Just the Automation Academy that you touched on, and you said it was about bringing kind of claims handlers and claims people into the process of developing automation and things like that. How deep does that go? Is that a kind of, is it a training course? Is it an online area? What?
No, it's, yeah, so we launched it as a little bit of a pilot last year, and the sort of handlers that were on the academy were doing effectively a day a week with our sort of operational function, who are sort of our RPA experts and learning the skills. And actually, we're just evolving that. So we've offered the opportunity for those people to actually transition out of a traditional handling role and go to a full 5-day sort of claims automation role. And sort of how we're anticipating it work is that they will work and kind of upskill themselves with our colleagues that kind of do this day in, day out. And they'll actually kind of then stay in claims as a little bit of an automation hub. So you've got this really lovely blend then of frontline handler experience with sort of automation and AI skills that can seek out and build the right processes. And we're really excited to see that what happens with that. But it is, in terms of how deep does it go, I'd say pretty deep, to be honest. And what's been lovely is to see handlers who have almost jumped at the chance to sort of do the sort of 20% opportunity, but then I think something like 90% of them are converting to the 100% opportunity, and people kind of really investing in themselves, I think has just been a real joy to see.
Yeah. Really and so I think that's a key point, isn't it? And something coming out the earlier session, I think it was Jeremy Trott who was talking about the move from work from home and just how extraordinary people's efforts were. They weren't really asked; they were just like, right, okay, we need to do this. Let's do it. And I think if you give people the opportunity, they will jump at it. I'm going to move on to the final question that came out of the survey, and I'll ask for questions before the event and comes out in the poll that we've just run as well. I'm going to try this with you, Rohan. So, what are the legacy technology challenges that we need to think about, and how do we overcome them? What's your experience, Rohan?
I think some of the legacy technology challenges that we really see, Jeremy, is the fact that systems don't talk to each other, right? They are all inoperable. They are standalone systems, and to really process a claim or a transaction from the start to the end, most organizations end up touching 2-3 systems, because you have a lodgement system, you have a notification system, you have a workflow, you have an indexing or a document management system, and then you have the policy administration system. And I think that challenge as such, we think is really not going to go away. But I think some of the ways that you can go ahead and overcome some of those are using some of the newer age solutions which are out there, which are low code, which sitting on top of all of these systems, and give that interface to the operator or handler that allows him to then go ahead and process a transaction and only see one or rather one screen, and everything else is then connected. And I think some of the opportunities that exist today with APIs as well as some of the other methods to get systems to talk to each other will help organizations adopt this digital transformation at a much faster pace. I think for organizations wait to go ahead and do a complete overhaul is perhaps it's going to be a long-term project, and I don't think there is really appetite for those types of projects at this point. But I think it is going to be solutions that will help bring together the kind of bring the data together as well as get systems to talk to each other, perhaps not in an intrusive manner, but at least in terms of using some of the solutions which are available is perhaps going to be at least the the best outcome which organizations can have in the short to medium term. I don't know, Amy, Christine, is that something which you're seeing, and is that in line with the way your organizations are looking at this at these challenges?
Yeah, so Christian and I looking at each other like a Mexican standoff. I think the short answer, Rohan, is yes. I think a couple of thoughts that have gone through my mind as you've been speaking. I think the first is, I think you need to separate the two. I think, like Elon Musk hasn't built the Tesla by reinventing a car, he's built something brand new. And I think we need to sort of almost take legacy and perhaps draw a line in the sand and then think about reimagining the future rather than trying to evolve from one to the other. I'm not sure that you can do that. I think you have to draw a line and kind of create new. And then my other comment is a little bit linked to the poll we had before me. My answer to the previous poll would have been culture and legacy mindset. And I make no excuses for kind of making my point again, that I think if you've got that, you can overcome legacy technology challenges if you've got the right people thinking in the right way. But yeah, Christine, what do you think?
I absolutely agree with that. People think in the right way. It's amazing what you can actually change. So I accept the bit that it's a legacy system, and really to overhaul the whole thing is a massive amount of money, and to change it, sometimes it's really hard to get your head around. And the point that Amy makes about drawing a line in the sand, I think sometimes is the only way you can sort of jump. Because you have to be so brave, because how many times do people say, I've done it like that for years, this is how we do, this is how we handle claims. And so it is quite a brave move to do it, but oh my word, once you do it, it could be amazing. And it's that win that you would have to move for, I think. But yeah, I agree exactly.
And it's really interesting because one of the things that I was really worried about doing last year was going out to some of our handlers, most of our handlers, and saying, look, we're making a decision on a particular system to draw a line here, and we're going to build new over here, which means we're not going to be doing things like data migration. For a period of time, this means you're going to have to handle on two systems. And I was ready for the sort of onslaught of people saying, the challenge that was going to cause them day to day. But the feedback we got was that people were really glad that we're being honest and transparent, and actually saw the rationale and the logic for drawing a line in the sand. And I think, like you say, sometimes it's a risky or brave decision, but actually I think it's one that people do understand and support, as long as you take the time to explain the why.
Yeah, and they can see the end point, so they're okay with it. Yeah, we're trying to do something, we are looking to fix it. I think they do. It really helps from a cultural point of view, I think.
And I also think just that conversation has changed around legacy. And I mentioned this at the start of the day, but I think the conversation 2 or 3 years ago, especially at our technology conferences, was how can we simplify or put new technology in that will save us costs. And I actually think now it's about how do we put technology in that is going to enable us to serve customers better. And we'll worry about cost savings later, because they will come, because you're not going to have that demand failure that you were talking about, Christine, and we're going to have better transparency around the data to look at the OpEx costs and all that kind of thing. But I think that this shift to become truly customer centric around all the conversations, I think is really encouraging, that I've certainly witnessed over the last 18 months, 2 years. And as we've seen in the earlier poll, people are acting on it. It isn't just, they're not paying lip service, we're seeing real improvements. So that's really good. Any final thoughts? I've done this throughout the day, but as people are looking at their operational, perhaps their legacy, or they're going, God, crikey, how am I going to actually embark on this journey? And Have you got any nuggets that you could share with the audience on what you thought? Yeah, if you're going to start a transformation project, whatever it is, make sure you do X. Any thoughts on that? Amy, I'm going to come to you first.
That's a big question. I'm not sure that there's a silver bullet per se, but the thought running through my mind is just give something a go. I think gone are the sort of days of these multi-year, multi-million pound transformation projects, because just with the pace of change we were talking about earlier, you could make the perfect plan and in 2 weeks' time it's going to be out of date. So I think this concept of small incremental and experimentation is really, really important, because by doing that you learn something and you can course correct as you go. So I guess mine would be just give something a go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good response. I think one thing that I would probably say is you have to sort of know where you're going. So I'm not saying build this massive requirements thing. I'm just saying you have to understand the vision and what it is you're looking to deliver, so that then as you're making those like small little changes and you go and give it a go, it has to be going in the right direction, I suppose.
Yeah.
Rohan, your thought?
Process, very often, our conversations with, customers or clients start off by wanting to focus on a very narrow, part of the process, that's whether it's a first notification of loss or payments or recoveries. But we think, looking at the end to end, gives you the best opportunity to, one, fix the journey, in its entirety, and two, also, impact the right outcomes. I mean, it's all about, the outcomes of indemnity, customer experience, and cost of operations. And I think it's, you cannot, impact one at the expense of the other, because all three are very, very closely related. And I think, looking at it end to end will give you the best opportunity to understand the impact on all three. So our recommendation is always to, look at it end to end.
Yeah. And sorry, can I just add one thing, John? Because I think Trevor's made a really good point in the chat as well about involving people in the day job.
Go ahead.
And I think that's a really important. It actually allows you maybe to do that kind of end-to-end view. And I'd probably extend it even further, Trevor's comment, and say maybe involve your customers too, so that you do it from an outside-in perspective rather than the other way around. But, yeah, sorry, just wanted to comment on that.
No, definitely. Thank you all very much. So thank you to Christine, Amy, and Rohan for a really great discussion. Thank you ever so much for your contributions. Thanks very much. So I'm now going to put in the chat a link to join the in the Zoom call. So as I said, you can there we are. Click the link there and go straight in, and we shall carry on the conversation. Do switch your cameras on and share your experiences. Thank you to EXL for sponsoring that session, and the panelists. I have a round of applause for you. I forgot that. Here we are. Thank you ever so much for your contributions, and look forward to seeing you shortly in the Zoom call. Thanks very much.
Thank you.